Hey everybody, today's video is going to be about dual back button autofocus. I've made a series of videos teaching people how to set up dual back button autofocus, but a lot of people still have questions about how to use it, why would they want to use it, so this video is going to attempt to explain why I really prefer dual back button autofocus and why I think it's advantageous for sports and wildlife photographers, as well as help to explain how to properly use it. Now the number one question that I get asked about, am I supposed to hold the back button all the time when I want it to focus? Do I just press it once and then it focuses from there? What am I supposed to do with the back button? The first thing you have to understand is you want to have servo autofocus enabled, not one shot, because when we're holding down the back button to make it autofocus, we want to be using servo autofocus. That way it's going to be consistently tracking our subject. Once you understand that you want to have servo autofocus enabled, the short answer is yes, you do need to hold down that back button for the entire time that you want it to be focusing. And this is really where the advantage of back button autofocus kicks in. It's the fact that you can let go of the back button and then it's not going to autofocus, and that's the real advantage that you're getting because now you're able to focus and recompose an image without refocusing, which you can't do if you have the autofocus tied to your front button, which is really more of a strategy that used to be used in the day of the DSLR autofocus systems, but there are still times that it's going to be advantageous for you to use it with a mirrorless camera. Like for instance, if there's a bird in a cluster of branches, chances are the subject tracking is going to grab onto the branches and not the actual bird. This is where you could either choose to use spot autofocus and then recompose your image, or a lot of times you'll be able to use the spot autofocus to guide the autofocus onto your subject, and then you can retry using the subject tracking, and a lot of times it'll work after you've kind of guided the autofocus in the right direction. The thing that you have to really understand is that Canon's subject tracking is really good in the right conditions, but there are a lot of times that the software is going to fail you. It's not going to track the subject that you want all the time. The busier the frame becomes, the less likely that the tracking software is going to work for you. And that's why I really like to use the spot autofocus as my fail-safe focusing method. This way I'm able to switch between tracking autofocus, and if it does work, I can use it, but if it doesn't work, I'm able to very quickly switch right over to spot autofocus, which is very reliable. And I really can't stress enough how much more reliable I find the autofocus system from the Canon R bodies once I use dual back button autofocus. The second concern that I see come up all the time is that a lot of people struggle to get used to using the two buttons instead of using the single front button autofocus. And fair enough, I mean everybody likes to shoot differently. Back button autofocus is not going to be the solution for every single photographer out there. For a lot of people it's worked very well, myself included. For others, they really don't like having to learn how to use the two buttons at the same time. They don't see the advantage to it, and that's certainly understandable. Getting used to using two buttons to autofocus definitely has a learning curve, and it's going to feel weird at first. I remember the first time I used dual back button autofocus, it was klutzy, it felt confusing, and I was missing shots. It definitely seems like it's a more complicated system when you first start to use it, but I promise you that once you get past that learning curve and you develop the muscle memory and really get used to back button autofocus, it will not bother you in the slightest. I don't think about it whatsoever when I'm using it now. It will take some time to adjust to this, but I promise you that once you do, it becomes second nature, and there's a massive advantage to using dual back button autofocus. So just to recap, one of the main advantages is being able to actually stop your system from autofocusing, allowing you to recompose your image when needed. This is only useful on still subjects, but I use this method more often than you might think. The second reason is that you have dual back button autofocus, which allows you to utilize spot autofocus and Canon's tracking focus seamlessly. It does take a little time to get used to it, but I do think that you will find that it will make your Canon R body autofocus system much more reliable. Like I said earlier in the video, I made two separate videos that help you set up dual back button autofocus for your Canon R7 and R6, so make sure you check out those videos if you want to set that up. I suggest you save it to one of your C settings, that way you're able to reset your manual mode back to default. You'll be able to switch between front button and dual back button autofocus methods seamlessly. This will allow you to really practice with it, but still have front focusing autofocus available when you need it. I hope this video helped answer some of the questions that you might have had about dual back button autofocus. If it did, go below, subscribe, click the notification bell, and I'll see you on my next video.